The Empire watches, humanity waits. The vastness of space stretched endlessly beyond the Imperial scanning vessel, a monolithic warship drifting through the black void like a silent predator. Its hull shimmered with reflective alloys, absorbing and distorting light, making it seem like a phantom in the night. This ship was no ordinary scout. It was the ISV Dominion, the Empire's most advanced reconnaissance vessel, sent to survey new planets for conquest. And now, it had found Earth. Inside the vessel's high command deck, Grand Admiral Cale Vorn stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back, as he observed the holographic projection of Earth before him. The planet rotated slowly in the tactical display, its blue oceans and swirling white clouds innocent and defenseless. Or so he believed. Pathetic, he muttered, eyes narrowing. They are still using fossil fuels to power their ships. Their satellites operate on basic electromagnetic frequencies. They have no defense grids in orbit. This world is primitive. Beside him, Strategic Officer Relmar, an older but equally ruthless Imperial tactician, studied the gathered data. He frowned. They do appear technologically inferior, my lord, Relmar admitted, but their infrastructure suggests a highly adaptable species. Their population centers are large, widespread, and their communications, though outdated, are highly resilient. Cale Vorn scoffed. Irrelevant. They will either submit or be erased. The Empire has absorbed thousands of civilizations, and this, humanity, will be no different. He turned toward the communications officer, a sleek, silver-skinned alien with 3 piercing eyes. Transmit the message. The officer nodded sharply, activating the ship's planetary broadcast array. Deep under the lunar surface, Earth watches back. Commander Thomas Calloway stood in silence inside a classified military installation buried deep beneath the dark side of the moon. For 20 years, Earth's top military minds have been preparing for this moment, the day when humanity's greatest secret would be tested. Humanity had known about the Empire for decades. Ever since a damaged alien scout ship crashed in the Arctic, everything had changed. What the world believed was an ordinary meteor impact had, in reality, been first contact. The remnants of that ship had given birth to Project Revenant, a covert defense initiative that had worked in total secrecy to reverse engineer alien technology. And now the fruits of that labor stood waiting in the darkness of space. Thomas turned toward Lieutenant Lisa Carter, who monitored the Empire's broadcast transmission as it flashed across Earth's networks. "It's happening," she said. "Patch it through," Thomas ordered. "Let's hear what these bastards have to say." The holographic display in the center of the command room flickered, revealing the tall, purple-skinned humanoid that now spoke to the people of Earth. The Empire's message, a demand for submission. The alien's piercing, golden eyes stared through the broadcast. "People of Earth," it began, its smooth, fluent English, a result of advanced universal translation algorithms. "I am Grand Admiral Cale Vorn of the Galactic Empire. We have observed your civilization and have deemed you worthy of integration into our dominion." The speech was rehearsed, as if they had given it thousands of times before. "Your species has reached a level of advancement that allows for inclusion within the greater galactic order. However, your technological inferiority is unfortunate." The alien's lips curled slightly, as if in amusement. "We offer you the opportunity to join us peacefully. You will serve the Empire. Your resources, your industry, and your people will be brought into our fold. Your world will know prosperity beyond its current limitations." Then the voice darkened, growing cold. "Resistance would be unfortunate." The message ended. For a brief moment, silence filled the command center. Then Lisa scoffed. "Wow! Real original." The room erupted with quiet laughter, but Thomas remained stone-faced, his eyes locked on the holographic display. "They think they've already won," he muttered. Lisa tilted her head. "Well, haven't they?" Thomas turned toward her, his expression sharper than steel. "No," he said simply. "They haven't." And then, as if in answer, The stealth sensors picked up movement behind the moon. The fleet had arrived. The Empire's first mistake. Back aboard the ISV Dominion, Admiral Kelvorn awaited the humans' response with growing impatience. A species as technologically backwards as this should have already acknowledged their inferiority. Instead, silence. The planetary leaders had not responded. Their military did not react. The humans simply waited. Relmar glanced at him. "Do you believe they will refuse?" Kelvorn sneered. "It does not matter. If they will not submit willingly, then we will force them to their knees." Then the sensor alarms blared. Kelvorn's head snapped toward the tactical officer. "What is it?" he demanded. The officer's face paled, her fingers trembling as she reviewed the data. "My lord, we are detecting multiple energy signatures behind the moon." Kelvorn froze. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the screen. "Impossible," he whispered. "We scanned this system. Their defenses are rudimentary at best." The officer swallowed. "Sir, these readings, they're not rudimentary." She hesitated. Then she turned the display toward him. Kelvorn's blood ran cold. Dozens of ships, human ships, were emerging from the dark side of the moon. But they were not primitive vessels. They were warships. Large, powerful, advanced. And they had been waiting. The hunters become the hunted. In the Lunar Command Center, Thomas watched as the fleet decloaked, revealing humanity's true strength. Hundreds of ships, each one armed with experimental weaponry, a fusion of human ingenuity and stolen Imperial technology. Their hulls gleamed under the distant sun, reflecting the cold promise of war. Lisa inhaled sharply. They have no idea what they just walked into. Thomas smirked. "No," he agreed. "They don't." And then he gave the order. "Activate Project Thunderbolt." Behind the moon, Earth's fleet powered up. Engines roared. Shields came online. Humanity had never been helpless. They had just been waiting for the Empire to make the first mistake, and now that mistake would cost them everything. Humanity's answer, Project Thunderbolt Unleashed. The ISV Dominion floated in silence, the pride of the Imperial reconnaissance fleet. It had never faced battle, never needed to. The Galactic Empire did not fight wars. It absorbed civilizations, expanding like a relentless tide across the cosmos. But for the first time in its history, the Dominion found itself out of place. The humans should have responded by now, should have fallen to fear, awe, or desperation. Instead, they did nothing. And now, their entire fleet had just appeared from the dark side of the moon. Grand Admiral Kelvorn clenched his jaw as the data scrolled across his command terminal. Hundreds of ships, not the antiquated fossil fuel-powered craft his analysts had predicted. These were warships, sleek, advanced, armed, and every single one of them had been hidden from Imperial sensors. "They deceived us," Kelvorn murmured, his fingers tightening into a fist. Relmar, his strategic officer, leaned forward, his violet-skinned face turning a shade paler. "Sir, these vessels aren't like the ones we scanned from orbit. These aren't crude, primitive human ships." Kelvorn's eyes narrowed as he analyzed the tactical display. The fleet's energy signatures were something different, not fully human. "They're using hybrid technology," he realized. "They've been reverse engineering our systems." Relmar's throat tightened. "They were preparing for this," he whispered. Kelvorn turned his gaze back toward the massive holographic projection of Earth's fleet. It was a sight that sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't a species caught off guard. This was a species that had been waiting. And now, they were ready to strike. The Lunar Command Center, Earth gives its answer. Deep beneath the moon's surface, Commander Thomas Calloway stood before the war table, his hands resting on its steel edges as he watched the fleet decloak. Lisa Carter, his tactical officer, scanned the incoming data feeds. "They're still hesitating." Thomas smirked. "They should be." Behind him, the holographic screen displayed the Imperial warship, its sleek, massive frame holding position in orbit, broadcasting arrogance. But arrogance wouldn't save them now, not from Project Thunderbolt. Thomas turned to his lead strategist, Colonel James O'Connell. "Is the system online?" O'Connell nodded. "Fully powered, weapons primed, shields at 110% efficiency." "Then it's time," Thomas said. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with focused intensity. "Transmit our response." Lisa grinned. "Oh, this is going to be good. The Empire receives humanity's response." Aboard the ISV Dominion, the sudden chime of an incoming transmission echoed across the command deck. Kelvorn turned sharply. "Put it through." The massive central screen flickered to life, and for the first time, the Empire saw Commander Thomas Calloway standing tall before them. His expression was not one of fear. It was amusement. "Grand Admiral Kelvorn," Thomas began, his voice smooth and steady. "Quite the entrance you made. I'm impressed." Kelvorn's golden eyes narrowed. He had seen conquered leaders attempt bravado before. None had lasted long. "You are delaying the inevitable," Kelvorn replied coldly. "Your planet is surrounded. Your species stands on the brink of its next evolution, one under the Empire's rule. If you submit now, you will be granted status as a subject world under Imperial protection." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Aha." Then he folded his arms. "Here's my counteroffer." He leaned forward, his gaze turning razor-sharp. "You leave. Right now." Silence. Then, Kelvorn chuckled. "You amuse me, Commander, but you fail to understand the gravity of your situation." "Oh no," Thomas said. "We understand it just fine." And then, before Kelvorn could react, the lunar base's primary systems came online. Project Thunderbolt. Humanity strikes first. For decades, humanity had been studying the wreckage of the Empire's crashed scout vessel. They had reverse-engineered its drive systems, improved upon its shield technology, and most importantly, developed countermeasures for any future invasion. Project Thunderbolt was the result of that effort. It wasn't just a fleet. It was an ambush. Without warning, the lead human warships, X-97 Titan-class destroyers, opened fire. Their weapons were unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. Energy-laced mass accelerator cannons fired rounds traveling at near-light speed, piercing through the Dominion's unprepared shielding. Kelvorn barely had time to register the attack before the first impact rocked the vessel. "Shields down to 63%. A technician shouted. "Return fire," Kelvorn roared. But before the Dominion's weapons could even power up, another unseen force entered the battlefield. From hidden silos across the dark side of the moon, humanity unleashed its real trump card: gravitic disruptors. Devices that disrupted artificial gravity fields, like the ones Imperial ships relied on for propulsion. Within seconds, half of the Dominion's fleet lost control. Panic in the Imperial fleet. Alarms blared across the Dominion's bridge. "Multiple ships are drifting. We're losing navigational control." Kelvorn's hands clenched the command railing. His mind raced. How? How was this happening? Humanity wasn't supposed to have this kind of technology. But as he watched his fleet struggle, another horrifying realization struck him. They hadn't just stolen Imperial technology. They had made it better. The Empire's second mistake. They underestimated humanity. Kelvorn knew what had to be done. He turned sharply to his communications officer. "Send a distress call," he ordered. But the officer froze, looking horrified. "Sir," he whispered, "they've already jammed our transmission arrays." Kelvorn stiffened. For the first time in his career, he understood what it felt like to be trapped. Commander Calloway's final message. Back on the Lunar Command Center, Thomas watched as the Imperial fleet struggled, its forces in disarray. Lisa let out a low whistle. "They're panicking." Thomas smirked. He opened a direct channel back to the Dominion. Kelvorn's furious face appeared on the screen. You dare. Thomas held up a hand. You came here thinking you'd find a primitive species, easy to conquer, he said coolly. Instead, you found a prepared one. Calvorn's expression darkened. Thomas leaned forward, his next words cutting through the silence like a knife. Welcome to humanity's home. Then he issued the final order. Fire everything. The sky exploded. Humanity's fury. The Empire faces the unthinkable. The first shots had been fired, and now the void of space erupted into a battlefield. From the dark side of the moon, hidden silos unleashed a barrage of precision-guided missiles, each one carrying warheads designed to disrupt Imperial shielding. From Earth's orbit, Titan-class destroyers powered up their mass accelerator cannons, unleashing kinetic projectiles traveling at near-light speed, tearing through the hull plating of the ISV Dominion, and its fleet like a knife through soft metal. The Imperial fleet, once so confident in its overwhelming technological superiority, now found itself reeling under the weight of an enemy it did not understand. Humanity had never been the prey. They had been the hunters all along. Chaos aboard the ISV Dominion. The command deck of the Dominion was filled with screams, alarms, and flashing red lights. Grand Admiral Calvorn gritted his teeth, his golden eyes burning with disbelief as he watched the battle unfold. How? He snarled. How is this happening? Strategic Officer Relmar struggled to process the data. The fleet was losing formation. Ships were drifting out of position, their gravitic stabilizers disrupted by Earth's countermeasures. Our propulsion systems are failing on multiple ships, one of the technicians shouted. Shields dropping below operational levels. Another officer turned in shock. Their weapons are piercing our armor. Calvorn's claws dug into the railing. That was impossible. The humans had no access to this kind of technology. Their civilization was supposed to be decades behind in space warfare. But as he watched the Dominion's sister ships ignite, one by one, their hulls torn apart by relentless human firepower, he realized something terrifying. Humanity had never been behind. They had been preparing. And now, they were unleashing everything. The trap closes. Humanity strikes harder. On the lunar command deck, Commander Thomas Calloway stood watching the real-time destruction of the Imperial fleet. The plan had worked. Target their command ship, Thomas ordered. Lisa Carter smirked. With pleasure. From the Titan-class destroyers, a new type of experimental energy weapon came online, an EMP lattice pulse, designed specifically to shut down the power cores of Imperial vessels. With a single command, the first wave of pulses shot forward, striking 3 major Imperial warships. The effects were instant. Their lights flickered. Their engines died. Their weapons powered down. And in that moment of weakness, humanity struck without mercy. Railgun projectiles shattered their exposed hulls. Fighter squadrons swarmed in, tearing through the wreckage like wolves among sheep. The Empire's fleet wasn't just being beaten. It was being slaughtered. Desperation aboard the ISV Dominion. Calvorn's breathing was heavy as he stared at the destruction around him. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. The Empire had never lost a first-contact war before, but this wasn't just a war. This was a massacre. Admiral, our losses are unsustainable. Relmar cried. We must retreat. Calvorn's eyes burned with fury. To retreat now meant humiliation, a dishonor he could never erase. But if they stayed, he looked at the tactical display. The humans weren't just attacking. They were surrounding what was left of his fleet. They were closing in for the kill. Calvorn's jaw clenched. Signal the fleet. Begin emergency withdrawal. Relmar blinked. But sir, our jump drives. I know. Calvorn roared. Then we fight our way out. But the moment he gave the order, the Dominion's main engines flickered. The ship lurched violently. And then, everything went dark. The Empire falls silent. Humanity's final blow. On Earth, in the Global Defense Headquarters, a hush fell over the room. The massive display tracking the Imperial fleet suddenly showed dozens of signals vanishing. One by one, the Empire's mighty warships were disappearing. Not because they had jumped away, but because they had been obliterated. Admiral Avapatol let out a slow breath. "They're breaking," she said. "They know they've lost." Across the command center, cheers began to erupt. For decades, humanity had feared this day. The day an unstoppable force from the stars would arrive. And yet that day had come, and humanity had won. But Thomas Calloway wasn't smiling, because the battle wasn't over. Not yet. The final stand, the death of the Dominion. Aboard the crippled ISV Dominion, Grand Admiral Calvorn staggered, clutching onto the remains of his shattered bridge. The flagship was dying. Fire raged through the corridors. Explosions rippled across the hull. His crew lay dead or unconscious, the proud warriors of the Empire reduced to scattered wreckage. And outside, the human fleet was closing in. He knew what came next. They would demand surrender. But Calvorn would never surrender. Not to these monsters.